Court for the County of Wake is now convened and sitting for this special setting with the Honorable Judge G. Brian Collins Jr. present and presiding. Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. God save the state of this honorable court. Please be seated and remain quiet. Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Mr. Sheriff. I want to welcome everyone to this special ceremonial session of the Wake County Superior Court. I want to thank everybody who helped make this happen, which would include our elected clerk of court, Jennifer Knox, and her staff, Sheriff Harrison and his staff, Kelly Myers, our trial court administrator. Especially want to welcome those of you who are here as family and friends of the honorees. It means a whole lot to us to have you here. We're honored by your presence. Thank you for letting us spend some time with you today, celebrating the lives of your loved ones, and honoring their careers and their accomplishments. At this time, I want to turn the program over to the President of the Wake County Bar, Ashley Campbell.
Your Honor, may it please the court?
Yes.
Welcome, everyone. On behalf of the more than 5,000 members of the 10th Judicial District Bar, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this memorial session of court where we will honor 5 lawyers who meant so much to many of us and to our profession. We have a wonderful committee that does this work for the memorial sessions of court, and our co-chair of the committee, Brian Ayden, will lead the session. So, Brian, come up.
Thank you. May it please the court.
Yes.
Your Honor, Madam President, members of the bar, family, and friends, good afternoon, and welcome to this special session of Superior Court. My name is Brian Ayden. I am the co-chair of the Memorial Committee for the 10th Judicial District. And on behalf of my co-chair, Andrew Chalky, and the members of the committee, I want to send a special thanks to the families that have joined us today, that have allowed us to recognize your loved ones for our local bar. I always feel that these special sessions are truly that. They're special. And I walk away feeling encouraged and inspired about not just our profession, but our community. And for those of you that have previously attended these special sessions of court, my words will sound familiar and most likely considerably less eloquent than my predecessors, but I do believe they bear repeating. Today we gather not to mourn, but to remember 5 important members of our legal community, to honor their contributions to our profession, perhaps even share a laugh or learn something new about somebody that we have known for quite some time. And most importantly, to reflect upon the impact that these individuals had not only on our professional lives, but our personal lives as well. And with that, our first honoree is Judge Donald Smith, and he's presented by Ms. Mumma. Ms. Mumma is a double Tar Heel, graduating with her bachelor's and Juris Doctor from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Ms. Mumma?
Can I stand over here? Good afternoon. It's my honor to be here to speak on behalf of the family of Judge Donald Smith. On January 14th of 2015, North Carolina lost a valuable public servant and a great legal mind, and many people, including me, lost a treasured friend in Judge Donald Smith. As I was thinking about what to say here today, I could hear his voice in my head saying, "The winos on the street tell me that you're going to be finally honoring me. It's about damn time. And there's nothing wrong with lying." Before I begin, let me point out the family members that are here. His sister Myra, his nephews Keith and Joel, and is that Lee Grace? Lee Glass.
This one?
No, is Lee not here?
Oh, Lee.
No, Lee's not here. Lee Glass is not here. Those family members were fighting for the life of Judge Smith and his brother Jerry and their mother Hattie all at the same time. And they lost all 3 about the same time. And I know their hearts are still heavy with the loss of the 3 members. And I am honored to talk about the loss of your family member and the loss of the member of our bar here today. I don't want this to sound like an obituary. We've already had one of those in the paper, so I'm not going to say a lot about where he was born, which was Sampson County, or who his parents were, or where he went to school. If you really want to know all that, it's in the newspapers. What I'm hoping to tell you today is give you a sense of the person that he was, although I've been given 5 to 7 minutes, and to really give you a full picture, I would require much more time than that. And for those of you who knew him well, you will agree that some of the parts of Judge Donald Smith are better discussed in the bar room rather than the courthouse. And I look forward to continuing reminiscing with you in both of those places over the years. Judge Smith, or Donald, or Donnie, or Don, or as he told me to call him when I started clerking for him, Your Esteemed Majesty, was a man of many facets. He was a friend, he was an adversary who always treated his opponents with the greatest respect. He was a brother, a judge, and he was a jokester. He had a brilliant legal mind, and at the same time, he could laugh and act like a 75-year-old childish teenager. He had a stern temper and an infectious, joyful laugh and smile that caused a twinkle in his eye that is absolutely unforgettable and was contagious. He was loyal. He was loyal to the law. He was loyal to his family. He was loyal to his friends. He was loyal to friends of friends and children of friends. He asked about my kids every time I saw him. And as my good friend Amy Lee and his good friend Amy Lee would say, when he would come down to the courthouse, the Supreme Court, and see her very early in the morning, he would always ask about the vermins. Despite his best efforts and of the persona he tried to portray, he had one of the biggest, softest hearts I've ever known. And he would hate that I just said that. And I'm sorry, Judge. No matter how close we were, and we were very close, particularly when he was most vulnerable towards the end, I always called him Judge Smith. And I'll never be able to call him anything but Judge Smith. Partly because he never gave me permission to, but also because the word judge was such a critical and enormous part of who he was. He served as city attorney for 5 years, but he was a judge for over 40 years on the Superior Court bench and at the Court of Appeals. That is who he wanted to be. Even after retirement, he continued to be a judge every day of his life. He talked about cases, he talked about holdings, and he never held back on his opinion about whether he agreed with the holdings or whether someone got it all wrong. He also loved his state of North Carolina, and he called it his state of North Carolina. So much so that he might not be happy that a damn Yankee, as he called me, is memorializing him today. Everyone who knew Judge Smith knew that he had an encyclopedic memory of the law. And I'm not just talking about the case names and the holdings. I'm talking about the year. I'm talking about who the attorneys were for both sides, who the judge was that heard the case. And as Burley Mitchell once said, he's a lawyer's lawyer and a judge's judge. And there's no one who would fight harder for you than Judge Smith. He loved the justice system and anyone who served it. He loved it so much that it truly hurt him when it failed. When I clerked for him, he asked me what I wanted to do with my legal career, and I told him I wanted to find a cause to fight for. And when I started working in the area of post-conviction innocence work, he had enough confidence in our justice system that he told me it was a complete waste of time and energy. As the innocence work grew in our state and the human fallibility of the justice system was exposed, he became not only very concerned, but sad. He pushed me to fight harder, and he became proud of the work that I did. And he would say, Mumma, that's what he called me, Mumma, I'm damn proud of you. And it was like hearing it from my father when he said that. He was a card-carrying, flag-waving Republican through and through, always proud of the fact that he was North Carolina's first Republican Superior Court judge of the 20th century. When he ran for the Court of Appeals with friend Justice Bob Orr remembered that Judge Smith called him and said, "Our reputation as Republicans has been destroyed." And Justice Orr asked why, and Judge Smith, with his half-talk, half-laugh comment, said, "We've been endorsed by the News and Observer." He called it the News and Disturber. Despite his loyalty to his party, he always put politics aside and did his best to render fair and sound decisions from the bench. He loved being a mentor and giving advice to his clerks and to any new attorney to the bar. He was always quick to offer to meet at his favorite restaurant, the Mecca, to talk through anything that you wanted to talk about. His advice was always wise, and so wise that anyone who received it was glad to receive it, whether it was solicited or not. My youngest child, Madison, is a first-year law student this year. He met her when she was 5, and she could do a stomach roll that amused him to no end. She would stand there and roll her stomach, and he would get her to do it over and over again. When she was 21, he asked her to do it again. And he didn't understand why when I told him that it was a little inappropriate to ask, and responded that she was way too old for him. She recently asked me to read a legal memo for her, and I said to her after reading it, "You don't say the court wrote, you say the court held. And the court doesn't think, the court finds." Those were the exact words that Judge Smith said to me when I clerked for him. And I fondly remember all the guidance that he gave me over the years. Among other cases, Judge Smith played a major role in the landmark case, Bailey versus State of North Carolina, which resulted in a refund of illegally collected taxes for over 185,000 North Carolina retirees. Although there are many who will have lasting and fond memories of Judge Smith, his colleagues in that case, including his very close friend Gene Boyce, established the Judge Donald L. Smith Professorship for Studies in Constitutional and Public Law in his honor at Wake Forest School of Law. It's a modest but lasting memory of his true love of the law, which he always spelled with a capital L. He's a lawyer's lawyer, he was a judge's judge, he was a friend's friend, and he will always be missed and remembered. Thank you.
Our next honoree is Tracy Chappell Curtner, and Ms. Curtner will be presented by Hal Askins. Mr. Askins attained his bachelor's degree from Davidson College, and he is a graduate of the Campbell University School of Law.
Interesting to follow that presentation on somebody. I had the privilege to park next to that judge for a couple of years, and it made it very interesting. I very well remember appearing before Judge Eagles and Judge Smith in a particular panel before I retired. I'm here today, Your Honor, and if it may please the court,
Yes, sir.
to speak on behalf of the family of Tracy Curtner. Tracy Chappell Curtner was born on June the 17th, 1967, and she grew up in Brown Summit, North Carolina, a little community just north of Greensboro. She got her education formally at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She stayed there and got a law degree in 1992. From there, she began her practice in the state of North Carolina. Her practice spanned both private practice and public service. She served in a number of private law firms. She also worked for several years at the North Carolina Department of Justice, where she represented such clients as the North Carolina Division of Motor Vehicles and the Industrial Commission. Tragically, Tracy died on June the 5th, 2016, just a few days before her 49th birthday. Sorry, I thought I could do this. Trying to describe Tracy is a little bit like holding up a picture of the Grand Canyon and comparing that to being there. It just can't be done. Tracy's personality puts a stretch on the ability of descriptive quantification to the point. Now, I can just say she was truly unique. She was one of a kind. I will tell you that she was extremely intelligent. She was fiercely independent, selectively but unabashedly irreverent, colorful, but most of all, she was incredibly fun to be around. She was physically petite, but she had an enormous personality. She was extremely competitive, and she was the epitome of a zealous advocate for her clients, but she reserved her scrappiest fights for those people that she perceived to be unfairly disenfranchised, disadvantaged. The underdog always fought. She was uninhibitedly spontaneous, but she was the ultimate organizer. She was the go-to person to organize anything, whether it was a trial or a social event. She was a loyal friend, and she was the life of every party. She was actually a portable party. She was equally comfortable in a cocktail dress or cowboy boots, a deer stand, or a courtroom. Anybody who had more than a passing acquaintance with Tracy, whether personally or professionally, could not possibly come away without in some way being affected by knowing her. And that's whether or not you were on the receiving end of that little impish grin and the twinkle in her eye when she was pulling a prank on somebody, or if you were the recipient of one of the endless gestures of kindness that she always did to support folks who were in a personal crisis or in a hard time. Tracy just had a unique ability to connect with people, all kinds of people. People were drawn to Tracy like moths to a flame, truly. I asked several of her friends and coworkers to recount some experiences that we could talk about and share today. I think we decided, much like Judge Smith, that I won't be telling stories today because the best ones are not suitable for the courtroom. Did I say colorful? However, one of the young attorneys that worked with her and was mentored by Tracy did share with me, and I thought captured in very plain language by her observations, what Tracy's character was about. And so this afternoon I would like to share some of what she wrote with you. She says, Tracy Curtner was larger than life. Despite her small size, she was big as a personality. She had friends everywhere, at the Attorney General's office, at her clients, the DMV and the Industrial Commission, at private law firms, at the bank, at the vet, her hairstylist, in her neighborhood, old friends from high school and college, new friends, young friends, family friends, friends from different states, friends on the internet, friends of friends. Wherever Tracy went, she made friends. I've seen her make friends with opponents in the courtroom. Speaking of friends, we all know that in the legal profession it's very rare to find an attorney who's universally liked on all sides of the bar, but that was Tracy. She was a textbook definition of a lawyer's lawyer. She got along with everyone, no matter who they were or what client they represented. To court, Tracy always wore bright, unexpected suits and dresses where she stood out in a sea of black and blue. On one occasion, a stylish pink suit prompted a compliment from the notoriously irascible Superior Court Judge Evelyn Hill, and that was no small feat. With her litigating in court or simply running errands around town, Tracy stood out in the crowd. Besides her social skills and her impressive wardrobe, Tracy was an exceptionally talented lawyer who was endowed with a strong work ethic, a deep self-confidence, charisma, and an ability to talk about complicated legal issues in a language that a jury could understand. She was fair but firm in her representation of her clients. Although Tracy won countless jury trials and appeals over the years, her proudest accomplishment, without doubt, was being mother to Kate and Lucas, who are here today. Kate. She talked about them often with her colleagues, and her desk was covered with their pictures. Her walls featured their artistic masterpieces, and she kept a stash of snacks and candy in her desk drawers for when they came to visit the office, or at least that was her excuse for hoarding junk food. Outside of work, Tracy traveled where she wanted to travel. She laughed at every chance, and she learned what she wanted to learn, except I understand in the case of child lessons where she tried. She pursued the dreams that she wanted to chase, and she enjoyed life on a grand scale. The attorney went on to say that whenever I think about some of life's most important choices, it is how to live, what work to pursue, what makes for a fulfilling life. I think of Tracy and of her extraordinary example. She was a profound legal mind with a generous heart and a quick wit. I will never forget her ability to tell a funny joke, and I will remember her as outrageous, funny, incredibly gifted, but above all, full of heart. Throughout her career, Tracy chose to prioritize the pursuit of fairness and justice in her work and to find roles in the community that employ her abilities toward those ends. And although she had a less than average lifespan, Tracy did not live an average life. She will be remembered as an outstanding attorney, litigator, friend, sister, daughter, but most importantly, mother. Her passing has left a deep void in the North Carolina State Bar that will not be replaced. And I couldn't agree more or say it better. To those of us that didn't know her, a memorial service just alone can't do her memory justice. For the rest of us, a memorial service is fitting and proper to honor her memory. But if you knew her or were counted among one of her many friends, her memory is truly indelible. We will simply never forget Tracy Curtner. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Our next honoree is Randall Carey Scarborough, who will be presented by Richard Nordan. Mr. Nordan completed his undergraduate degree at NC State, obtained his law degree from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Mr. Nordan.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Court.
Yes, sir.
I'm here to talk to you for a few minutes today about my classmate and Judge Collins' classmate from UNC, and that was Randy Scarborough. Well, when I think about Randy, there are two attributes that stand out. One was his cultural breadth, and the other was his stoicism in the face of physical adversity. Randy was born in Mecklenburg County in 1954. His cultural breadth, I believe, is partly attributable to the fact that he was a combination of his blue-collar father, Bill, who was a welder, and his white-collar mother, Ellen, who was a journalist. The parents divorced while Randy was young, and he was raised by his father. Randy's blue-collar roots can be reflected in his love for motorcycles, old cars, NASCAR, and his willingness to volunteer shortly out of high school to join the U.S. Navy while the Vietnam War was still going on. While he was in the Navy, Randy served on the USS Kitty Hawk, which was an aircraft carrier, and the USS Blue Ridge, a command ship. While he was on the Kitty Hawk, Randy served in communications and helped write the ship's newspaper. Now, Randy's kidney problems arose while he was in the Navy, and he received a medical discharge. This began a string of kidney problems that followed him throughout his life. After Randy left the Navy, he attended Central Piedmont Community College on the GI Bill. He majored in political science, and while he was there, his interest in politics and history and foreign cultures started to rise. In part due to his extensive intellectual curiosity and in part due to a Brazilian girlfriend, he became fluent in the Brazilian language while he was at CPCC. He also had several Arab friends, and he also learned a lot of the Arabic language. Now, the Brazilian girlfriend I'm making reference to, she was a student at Brown University up in Rhode Island and was in Charlotte for the summer. And later on, after she went back to Brown, she was later featured in the Playboy issue Girls of the Ivy League, which was something that Randy was always proud of. So after CPCC, Randy transferred to the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, where he received his degree in political science. While he was at UNCC, he had the good fortune to meet his future wife, Miss Lillian Jones, who, by the way, is the daughter of Dick Jones, a long-standing member of the Wake County Bar. Ms. Lillian was a graduate of UNC, NC State School of Design, and the School of the Museum of the Fine Arts in Boston. She's an accomplished jewelsmith and musician. After receiving his undergraduate degree from Carolina, he then was admitted to UNC Law School, from which he graduated in 1985. So Randy then moved to Raleigh, and for his entire career, he practiced real estate law as a solo practitioner. Now, most folks don't know that Randy was the petitioner in a U.S. Supreme Court case. The case is known as Scarborough v. Principe. Principe was the Secretary of Veteran Affairs, and in 2004, this is a 2004 case which involved a controversy regarding the timeliness of pleadings under the Equal Access to Justice Act. The Equal Access to Justice Act is an act that allows somebody who's successful in a claim against the federal government to recover attorney's fees if the court finds that the initial position of the federal government was not substantially justified. The court held in favor of Randy in a case that in essence helped plaintiffs against the government who tripped over arcane procedural rules. In the oral argument in the case, Justice Scalia asked the plaintiff petitioner's lawyer, "Isn't this just a case about lawyers' fees?" To which Justice Ginsburg responded, "No, Justice, this is a case about veterans and justice for veterans." The court held for Mr. Scarborough. I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to mention Randy's appreciation for the Department of Veterans Affairs. Randy's numerous illnesses caused he and Miss Lillian to make countless trips to the VA in Durham. And despite all the controversy that surrounds the VA, Randy told me again and again how good the quality of care was and how it was important for people to know that they were doing a good job over there. Let me close by saying that Randy's sense of humor is probably one of his greatest attributes. He had sort of a gallows humor, sort of a sarcastic sense of humor, but he could laugh in the face of the greatest physical adversity. In fact, I think he was able to maintain a sense of humor almost to the end of his life. Randy was a devoted Tar Heel, loved the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and its sports teams, and he was a lifelong Democrat. For those of us that remember Randy's infectious smile, we won't ever forget him. Thank you.
Our next honoree is the Honorable William Ayden Bill Creech, and he is presented by his son, Zeke Creech. Mr. Creech actually attended Wake Forest University and obtained his master's from the London School of Economics, as well as his Juris Doctorate and his MBA from UNC Chappell. Mr. Creech.
Yes, sir.
Just want to say thank you again to the bar committee for putting this on. It's a wonderful thing. Thank you to the court.
Yes, sir.
Thank you to the court personnel for being here today. My name is Zeke Creech, and I'm one of three sons of Judge Bill Creech, and I'm here today with my wife Bess and my brother Charles and his wife and our sister-in-law Robin, and certainly our mother Sally. So, although we reflected a lot on Dad's passing recently, it took a little bit more time to think about all his legal contributions. We we unearthed some things, and it made it a little bit tougher to consolidate some thoughts today as a consequence. I think what I've learned is that he had a multifaceted, interwoven contributions in the legal community, and I just hope to share a small portion of that. I would like to say that as his son, and I know my brother would share this, we had the unconditional love of our father, and it was unwavering. So Bill Creech, but before I start, I would like to say that I've heard constantly from attorneys, especially those here in the courthouse, about Dad's courthouse mannerisms, etc., and his expansive vocabulary, including his frequent use of the words salubrious, appalled, dilatory, and the like. So I hope the court will not be appalled by my comments today if they are found to be dilatory, that they are offered in a salubrious manner. So, let me share this analogy. Bill Creech grew up in the small town of Smithfield, and I believe that he was a pebble of a boy or of a man, and that had lasting, he was dropped in there probably by Holt Lake, that had lasting influence, concentric circles within our community, within the legal profession, and beyond. Now, as I said, he was he was from Smithfield. He was so proud to be from Smithfield, so proud to be from Johnston County, extraordinarily proud to be a North Carolinian. He loved them all. And he felt truly blessed for the full life that he had, rich with opportunities and friends, and he felt responsibility to share that, and in particular with anyone who wanted to advance their educational and employment opportunities. His good friend, Dr. Oliver Williams, believed this was truly Dad's most lasting contributions, especially helping young people find an internship or job, make an introduction to a future mentor, or help them feel a part of the community within the bar or otherwise, and encouraging them to further their education or be the best they can be. The ripple effect and the example that he set inspired many, and we give thanks for that. Put another way, Bill Creech was the original connector. Before there was Kevin Bacon, before there was Facebook or LinkedIn, there was Bill Creech. In terms of his legal work or brushes with legal work, I did want to mention one interesting thing about Dad, and it relates to his good nature. And it's all the way back in the 1940s. He was visiting his brothers in Kinston and traveling either to or from, and it was along a back road, and he came across a mother with her two sons, and they had a flat tire. Well, my dad couldn't figure out how to change that flat tire, but he did get them to the service station, and they were scared. Apparently, they weren't certain who was going to come along, etc. Well, as it turns out, of course, my father wasn't responsible for this, but as it turns out, one of the young men there, he learned out later, turned out to attend school at Morehouse with Martin Luther King, would go on to integrate UNC Chapel Hill and UNC Chapel Hill Law, and he would later serve in the community with my father's brothers there in Kinston. His name was Harvey Beach. After growing up in Smithfield, he attended UNC and served in the Pacific in World War II, and then in the United States Foreign Service in London and Baghdad. And those 2 years in Baghdad, he really considered the millennium of his life. He moved back to the United States in 1955, started working in Washington at the U.S. Committee on Small Business in the Senate, and he attended Georgetown at night. He graduated from Georgetown in 1958 and would later move to North Carolina in 59. But in 1958, when he passed the bar, he received a congratulatory letter from Judge Larry Wood in Smithfield. And Judge Wood had lived across the street and wrote him a very nice letter. And the letter said, it was August 18th, 1958, Dear Billy, and it went on, but it was very nice. It ended in this, quote, in the practice of law, we have some satisfaction and some rewards. I hope for your success and happiness. With best wishes, I am very truly yours, Larry F. Wood. Dad responded back August 28, 1958, Dear Judge Wood, after some nice words, he said, quote, I shall be ever grateful for the assistance and encouragements which you have given me in this endeavor, and I am looking forward with pleasant anticipation to the prospect of being a member of the profession which you have enhanced through the years. This letter carries my very best wishes to you, Miss Wood, and Sally. Sincerely, William A. Creech. That was in 1958. Judge Wood subsequently passed several years later, and unbeknownst to both of them at that time, young attorney Bill Creech would marry Judge Wood's only daughter, Sally. Dad did move back the next year to Smithville to join the practice Levinson and Levinson with his uncle Lewis and his cousin Joe. He was there for 2 years when Senator Irvin called him and asked him to return to Washington to be chief counsel to the Senate Subcommittee on Constitutional Rights. It was at that point where they oversaw numerous studies and hearings on civil rights and civil liberties, and including the first studies undertaken by the Congress on the constitutional rights of the mentally ill, our military personnel, and of the American Indians. I saw recently an ABA Journal article that Dad wrote entitled "Congress Looks to the Servicemen's Rights," end quote. And the heading of the article indicated this, quote, "Justice under military law has advanced notably through the enactment in 1950 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Now, for the first time in the nation's history, a committee of Congress has made a comprehensive examination of the constitutional rights of servicemen." Mr. Creech describes the legislation that has been proposed as a result of the investigation, end quote. Well, he was in Washington until 65, moved back to Raleigh. In 1965, he joined Robinson Everett and his mother, Catherine Everett, in practice with Jerry Hancock and others in Raleigh and Durham. And in thinking about Dad's career in legal work, it occurred to me that he had just had the opportunity to work with some of the greatest legal minds in our nation's and our state's history, Senator Irvin, Catherine Everett, and future Judge Everett, who would be chief judge of one of the only 2 constitutional courts in the land. Now, in 1966, Dad, you may know he's involved in politics. He had his first run in Congress. Now, I would say 50 years later, he passes away. That's right. He passes away in last October. It was October 2016. We were there watching one of the last Trump-Hillary debates. And Dad would die the next morning. He wasn't really watching it that much. But my older brother laughed and kind of said, he said, "I think that last debate killed him." Of course, I think it's about to kill me. In any event, first run for Congress. His run for Congress was interesting for various reasons, but number one, he decided to take on the sitting chair of the House Agriculture Committee. That's just not generally a good idea. But he came very close. He only lost by 1 percentage point in the Democratic primary. He did that notwithstanding the fact that his home county of Johnson County had been gerrymandered out of the district. And his good friend, his law partner, Robinson Everett, got involved in some litigation that went all the way up to the Supreme Court and is really contextual for what we have here today. And by the way, the incumbent chairman was defeated by Jim Gardner in the general election, and that was a historic election for Jim Gardner, as some of you all know, in the Republican Party. Here's an excerpt from Judge Everett's law review article in around 2000, I think. He said, quote, "A hearing before a 3-judge district court led to the decision that the challenged 4th Congressional District was so lacking in compactness and contiguousness to deny equal protection. However, because the May 1966 primaries were fast approaching, the district court allowed the General Assembly to delay replacement of the unconstitutional plan until the 1968 elections. On appeal, the Supreme Court summarily affirmed. This frustrating outcome has been repeated in some other redistricting cases in North Carolina and elsewhere. A court decides that a legislature has violated the Constitution by designing gerrymandered districts which violate equal protection, but in deference to the legislature, the court allows the unconstitutional plan to remain in effect until the next election." Boy, that sounds familiar. That was a Democratic legislature. Well, in 1976, he finally won. He served in the North Carolina House and the North Carolina Senate. He was most proud of his time there, helping do a local bill to merge the city and county schools here, and also authored the Creech bill, which has served as an international model for exceptional children, especially those with developmental disabilities. And he was very proud of that work. In 1982, Judge Hunt appointed him to the district court right here in Wake County, where he served for 14 years, subsequently elected for 14 years. In 1996, he became an emergency judge and traveled to virtually every county across the state, had great interactions. He loved the court personnel. He greatly appreciated them, that it was a mutual relationship. They really looked after him, especially here in Wake County. Could not say enough about the people here in the court. It was during that time that Dad, I had the great honor of him swearing me in a courtroom just like this, not just quite as nice next door. It was nice. One funny story related to Dad trying to find some cufflinks in some small western North Carolina town, and he ended up putting paper clips instead. We got a lot of great stories when he passed away, and we heard from people from across the state. Dad ultimately retired from the bench and passed away, like I said, last October. But I do want to just kind of go ahead and conclude my remarks, if I can, by sharing a couple of comments from other lawyers and judges. We heard from any number of folks, and I'll just consolidate them here, but in particular from Judge Robert Rader and others. But David Kirby and Jimmy Nairn both stated how much they attributed a lot of their success to Dad's influence on their lives, either as growing up or in the legal profession, often sharing with John Wallace, and then Richard Nordan's here as well. Chuck Montgomery talking about vocabularies, etc. But let me just share 2 paragraphs about what Robert Rader said. He said, Bill loved his fellow man more than any individual I have ever known. He thrived on interaction with the people around him in his life and those he encountered for the first time. My thoughts about Judge Creech and the stories from the courthouse could continue endlessly. I think the thing that I admired the most about Judge Creech was his love of life. He seemed to absolutely love life and want to drink it up like a fine wine. He was always jolly and could make those around him happy. He could put a smile on the face of those he encountered, and he never let the challenges and stresses of life get him down. Undoubtedly, my life, as well as the lives of all my colleagues on the bench, have been made much better by being a part of the life of Bill Creech. Just want to say thank you again for the opportunity for being here today. It means a great deal. Thank you.
Our last honoree is Robert Lewis Fuerst, and Mr. Fuerst will be presented by Judge Jan Samet. Judge Samet graduated from High Point University and UNC Greensboro and obtained his law degree from the University of North Carolina at Chappell Hill. Judge Samet. Thank you.
Judge Collins, and may it please the court.
Yes, sir.
I am honored today to be able to talk about Robert Lewis Fuerst, who was a friend of mine for a number of years. Try 47. Now, Bayless, if a woman in leopard sort of skin pants comes up and tries to interrupt my remarks, please stop her, okay? My wife is always nervous whenever I speak in public, and there's a reason for that. I truly understand that she thinks I'm going to talk too long and tell too many irrelevant or irreverent stories. The Talmud, which is a book, it's a multi-volume commentary on the Hebrew Bible, says that a man who has 2 friends in his entire lifetime is truly blessed. I've had 2 friends. I've lost both of them to cancer. Bob Fuerst was my closest and best friend for 47 years. Now, it was an unlikely friendship. Bob Fuerst was academically gifted. The man was brilliant. Bob graduated from the University of North Carolina in 3 years and went from there for his 4th year to the University of Wisconsin to get a master's degree, and then he came back to go to UNC Law. I was not so academically gifted. As a matter of fact, when I was writing these remarks, I realized that I was probably responsible for the upper half of every graduating class that I took part in. And nobody ever thanked me for it. Now, if I'd known about Bob's academic achievements, probably would have been too frightened to talk to him. But Bob's modesty was extraordinary. He didn't talk about himself ever. And that being said, after we left law school, Bob went to Brussels, Belgium to get an LLM in international law, and I went to live in Clinton, North Carolina, and worked for the Honorable Algernon Lee Butler, who was the Chief Judge of the Eastern District of North Carolina. Both of us finished our experiences and returned to our respective hometowns of
Rocky Mount and the High Point to resume practice. Now, Bob went into general practice. He represented everybody, and he represented people of all levels and walks of life. I was not so inclined. I represented only business people. And I know that the first half of Bob's career, he did a substantial amount of domestic work, which now as a retired district court judge, I can really appreciate. In any event, in the it may have been the late 1980s, early 1990s, I had one of my oligarchs, one of the wealthy people in High Point, who had a daughter who lived in Rocky Mount who was having some domestic problems. And he thought she needed a lawyer and needed one who was a, quote, good lawyer. And so I didn't know anybody in Rocky Mount except Bob, and I didn't know, when you're a business lawyer and you don't do anything but business stuff, you refer all domestic, all personal injury, all criminal stuff out of the office. But your clients are expecting you to find the best and the brightest to represent them or theirs outside of your area of specialty. First person I called to ask about who I should get in Rocky Mount was a man named Rip Bernhardt, who was the head of the domestic practice at a firm then known as Smith, Moore, Smith, Shell, and Hunter, which was one of the larger firms in North Carolina at that time. And I called Rip and I said, Rip, got a problem, and it may be a nasty domestic action. Who should I send it to in Rocky Mount? And with no pause whatsoever, Bernhardt said, send it to Bob Fuerst. Well, I'm not very bright, but I am thorough. I always believe in checking my sources, and so I called another friend of mine in High Point, a man named C. Richard Tate Jr., who was an incorrigible character and probably the best domestic lawyer I knew in High Point. And I said, you know anybody in Rocky Mount? And Tate and his inimitable faction said, if you don't get Bob Fuerst, you're a damn fool. Now, I didn't know he was the best domestic lawyer in Rocky Mount. And I promise you, Bob Fuerst would have never told, it would have entered his mind. He wouldn't have said something like that. I had to go to strangers to learn that my friend was who I should send my valued client's daughter to. Now, when I got on the bench, I was a stranger in a strange land. My law firm did absolutely no domestic law. We did no criminal law. We did no tort law. And all I did was relatively complex business litigation. But I've been in the courts long enough to have some idea of what went on in the real world, and I muddled through most of it. But when I got into domestic practice, I was lost. I mean, Rule 50 is fairly arcane, but when you add the emotions and the other issues about things like child custody, it's a very difficult place for lawyers and judges. And I would call Bob on a regular basis and say, I got this situation. What do you think about this? Now, as Judge Collins will tell you, being on the bench is a lonely place to be. I had lots of friends before I got on the bench. After I got on the bench, nobody would tell me a damn thing. and it really sort of disappointed me because I rarely failed to share my opinions with judges, particularly those I'd appeared in front of, though I was always careful to make sure the sharing took place out of open court. Now, I called Bob in probably late 2008, doesn't make any difference. County of Guilford wanted to put together a videotape to give to all people who were going through custody litigation. It's a part of the mandatory custody mediation procedure. And I was asked to contribute some remarks. And I called Bob and I said, Bob, what should I tell people who are involved in custody actions? Because you know, what do you think's important? And Bob said, the most important thing you can tell them is listen to their damn lawyers. Now, he didn't say it as a joke. He was dead serious about it. He says, you need, and if you do anything else, when you're talking about domestic law and domestic lawyers, you need to explain to these folks in some way they can remember that they should listen to the person they've hired who is a quote-unquote expert. Well, Bob was a good lawyer, and the difference between a good lawyer and a lawyer, and boy, I learned it on the trial court bench, is to steal an analogy from Mark Twain. It's a difference between lightning and a lightning bug. And it is a substantial difference. Bob was a good lawyer. And he gave me an opportunity when I was making remarks on this videotape, which has now been shown to an awful lot of unhappy people. Unhappy before they heard my remarks and unhappy after. I said to them, I was a business lawyer. The only thing involved in the litigation I did for the most part was money. My obligations were to the corporations and to the shareholders that own the corporation. And I could tell anybody anything, and I did. I said in the early, and it was the late 90s, I was involved in a matter representing what was then the largest extant furniture operation in North Carolina. And they had a brilliant president. He was just sharp as he could possibly be, but he was acerbic, brilliant, and short-tempered. And he was just chomping at the bit to get up and testify in this litigation. And I told this brilliant individual, I wouldn't put you on the stand on a bet. I said, you'll make the jury angry. By the time you walk from counsel table to the witness stand, they'll already dislike you. And he said, why do you think that? And I said, because I know you. You're arrogant. You know, there's nothing wrong with being arrogant if you have a reason to be arrogant, and he did. But it's not something that endears you to people on a jury. Now, because I was involved only in money, I could tell this man that. But when you're a domestic lawyer, and the only client you've got is the one who may lose a child or may be forced into penury or other things of that nature if the lawyer doesn't do a good job, it's a horse of a very different color. And I spent some time following Bob's advice on that video for at least in child custody, to tell people, for goodness sake, listen to your lawyers. Now, whether it did any good or not, I would doubt, but at least Bob helped me keep my eye on the prize. He did that on a number of occasions. When I was first in domestic court, he would help me eliminate some of my more draconian ideas and helped me focus on the real issues, which were right important insofar as I can tell. The first half of Bob's career, he was a domestic lawyer, and the second half, he was a tort lawyer. Now, in this particular time in the history of the legal profession in the United States, the term trial lawyer is used with contempt by the vast majority of our elected and political leaders. Bob was proud to be a trial lawyer, and he was a damn good one. He represented people who had absolutely no hope of any justice whatsoever in this world other than the other side when they got to heaven or wherever else they were going. And he worked at it very hard. He routinely, Bob had beautiful offices here in Raleigh and Rocky Mountain and other places. And when I'd call to talk to him fairly regularly, he'd be on the road going to meet with clients. When you represent the poor and the disadvantaged, you need to understand that they trust no one. They believe everyone intends to harm them, or at least certainly not do them any good. But when Bob first told a potential client in a tort matter, I want to help you He was telling them the absolute God's honest truth, and he meant it with every fiber in his body. Now, there are literally thousands of people in the state of North Carolina whose lives were made better by this trial lawyer, Bob Fuerst. Bob and I are both Jewish, and when a Jewish person dies, no one would ever say he is or she is a good Jew. And most of my Christians friends, when somebody dies, they would say he was a good Christian. And everybody knows what that means. There's so many definitions of Judaism that nobody's really sure. So they say not he was a good Jew, they say he or she, it's a non-discriminatory term, was a Mensch. Mensch is the German and the Yiddish word for a man. And it doesn't mean, there are many differences in Judaism and Christianity, and at the core of it is the difference between man-centered and God-centered. Judaism is almost a totally man-centered religion. When somebody is called a mensch, it doesn't mean he or she was a saint. It means that he was a human being who laughed and cried and did everything he could do or she could do to enjoy himself, who aspired to great things and who failed and tried again. Thank goodness. I'd be a really worried man if we're at a different standard. Look at him, I'm realizing I'm taking too much time. When I talked about Judaism, I'm going to tell you about something, it's a legend, a Hasidic legend of the Lamed Vavnik. Now, Lamed Vavnik just is Yiddish for 36. And there's a belief among the mystics in the Jewish community that the existence of the world depends on the existence of 36 hidden saints. Now, Judaism's a lot more embracive of certain things than other religions, and one of these Lamed Vavnik doesn't have to be Jewish. All they have to be is a hidden saint. Hidden means exactly that. If anybody knows that they're one of the group, then it doesn't count. And God is believed to destroy the world on the one day when he can, or she, or him, or it, can no longer find 36 hidden saints on the earth at one particular time. Now, I've expressed the opinion about Bob's stature and belonging to that particular group, and his sister Sarah assured me that Bob was no saint, hidden or otherwise. And having known him for 47 years, I would say that he had his unsaintly moments. But in Judaism, just as in the concept of a good religious person, the standard, the measure that is used is a little bit different. A saint in Judaism is not necessarily someone who talked a good game or who believed or who was thought to have performed miracles. A saint's somebody who did stuff, who left this world better than the place he or she found it. And so if you're going to decide whether or not Bob Fuerst was a member of the Lamed Vavnik, you got to look at what he did and what he left behind. As a domestic lawyer, he was a skilled and a powerful advocate. But he used his immense skills and talent to counsel his clients to paths of moderation and attempted to work out everything that he could possibly work out. Now, when he couldn't work it out, he would use the traditional trial lawyer path of fire and destruction, but it was only as a last resort. Those clients who listened to him went their way in peace, and their children flourished and grew at least somewhat normal. When he turned his focus to tort law, he really had a major impact in North Carolina. He helped quite literally thousands of people. And these are people who had, and I know again that trial lawyer is a pejorative term among many of our leaders. But without trial lawyers, everybody in this room is in deep trouble, and I wish more people understood that. He did incredibly good things for an incredible number of people who couldn't afford legal services. Bob was a good man. He was a good lawyer. He was a good son to Herbert and Dale. He was a good husband to Claudia. He was a good father, and he was a good grandfather. When Bob knew that he had stage 4 lung cancer, Bob probably knew as much medicine as many of the members of the legal profession. He did a lot of work, and when Bob focused on an issue, he mastered it. He knew what stage 4 meant. Unfortunately, so did I. He dealt with that news with an equanimity that I can only envy. The only regret that Bob Fuerst had about leaving this vale of tears was that his grandchildren would not remember him. Well, that's not going to happen as long as I'm alive. I promise you that I will share my memories of Bob Fuerst with Sylvia and Robert and Maddie, and I will share them ad infinitum. At the end of a burial service in the Jewish community, the last prayer that is said is a ritual prayer called the Kaddish. And when the prayer concludes, the rabbi or the person leading the service will say to the participants who've come to the graveside service, may his or her memory be for a blessing. Bob Fuerst's memory is a blessing to all of those who knew him, and I'm deeply grateful to have been one of those people. Thank you, Your Honor, and thank you to the Wake County Bar.
Thank you.
That concludes today's program. I want to thank all the presenters for your thoughtful words and your memories shared today. Thank you to the members of the Memorial Committee, particularly my co-chair, Andrew Chappell, for their continued exceptional work in putting these sessions together. Many thanks to our videographer, Frontrunner Productions, Charlotte Sharp and Whitney Von Ham of the 10th Judicial District and Wake County Bar. To Your Honor, for presiding over this session, Madam Clerk, her staff, Mr. Bailiff, and of course, to all of you for joining us here for this special occasion. That said, Judge, leave it back in your hands.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank Mr. Ayden for, and all of his committee for putting together what's a very meaningful ceremony for those of us in the legal system. It's very inspirational. I've been coming to these programs longer than I can remember, and I always learn something about our history and leave it uplifted. And if Judge Creech were sitting here right now, he would say, "The court is pleased." Mr. Sheriff, please place this special ceremonial session of Superior Court into recess. Signing die.
All rise. Oh yes, yes, yes. This Honorable Superior Court for the County of Wake now stands adjourned. Sine die. God save the state and this honorable court.
Thank you very much.